Right, good evening ladies and gentlemen. This is the first meeting of this group and I don't know that we all know each other. We've got new members here, so what I thought we'd do is go around the table and introduce ourselves and say who we are and what our position is. So I think you must be Leon. Leon?
I'm an officer.
You're an officer?
Health safety advisor, so I've got an item on the agenda.
Right. Oh, and your name is?
Joanne.
Right, okay.
Francis Purdy Warren, Chairman of
Governance.
Can you put your microphone on? Because I'm assuming that we're recording.
Yeah.
We're
Just
recording.
happy that he knows.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Yes, Chairman of Governance Scrutiny, Bingham West Ward.
Councillor Wheeler, Chair of the Community Scrutiny Group. I did look at mine.
Councillor Val Bansal, Vice Chair Communities Group, Trent Ward.
Jennifer Walker, Reddington Ward, Vice Chair of the Governance Scrutiny Group.
It's difficult to get your tongue around it all, isn't it? We'll get there in the end.
Laura Webb, Democratic Services Officer.
And I'm Tina Comberlack, and I'm the Chairman of the Corporate Overview Group.
Peter Linfield, Executive Manager for Finance and Corporate Services.
Kath Marriott, Deputy Chief Executive.
Sarah Whittaker, Financial Services Manager.
Charlotte Caven-Atack, Service Manager for Finance and Corporate Services.
Neil Clark, Chairman of the Growth and Development Scrutiny Group.
This really bodes well.
Councillor Abby Brennan Radcliffe on Trent Ward and Vice Chair of the Growth and Development Board.
Leanne Ashmore, Service Manager at Transformation. I'm standing in for Dave Mitchell today for the Growth and Development.
Hello, Leanne. I don't think we've met.
David Banks, Executive Manager for Neighbourhoods.
Lovely. Well, that's our introductions. So we go to item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence.
No apologies.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. No declarations of interest. And item 3 is the role and remit presentation, and I believe this is going to be a verbal one.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I don't want to take up very much of your time, but I did want to just remind the group about the terms of reference that were agreed to at Council in May for this group. Hopefully a lot of the items on the agenda this evening will relate to those. I also just wanted to remind the group of your role as the change champion for scrutiny, as well as the chairman of Corporate Overview Group, and to point out that hopefully we need to bear this in mind this evening, that the purpose of scrutiny is to be a critical friend. It's about construction, it's about getting better community outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to just endorse what you've said there about a critical friend. This group is all about working together, and that's cross-party, and that's working with officers, and it's working with cabinet. I don't want any feeling of them and us. I want us all to be working together, because at the end of the day, we all have the same aims. So that's where the critical friend comes in. Thank you, Charlotte. So we now have on our agenda Health and Safety Annual Report, which is on pages 1 to 8.
Right, thank you, good evening. So I'm the Health and Safety Advisor for the Council, and I'd like to just present to you the key findings from the annual Health and Safety Report, and that's covering the time from April 2018 up to the end of March 2019. The first slide is looking at the progress to achieving the goals that were set for this year. The first goal was to complete the low-risk health and safety audits across the authority. So they were last done in 2014-15. So I completed 10 separate health and safety audits with the managers. This gave me a real good opportunity to meet some of the managers that I don't tend to really deal with as much because they're such low risk. And obviously I tend to dedicate my time to the high risk areas. So that was a really informative and useful thing to do. The second thing was to review policies that are greater than 3 years old. There were 11 policies that hit that mark, and we needed to complete those within the 12-month period. 8 were successfully reviewed and updated. There were 3 outstanding policies because they needed a little bit more consultation because of the changes within them. They'll hopefully be completed by the end of June and will be implemented then. The third goal was to look at moving towards putting in the portfolio for the Gold Award for Workplace Health. So we've currently got the Silver Award. The County Council have been working on the award recently, and the last couple of years it's been being worked on. So we've just been working hard as Workplace Health Champs to keep workplace health going within the council. And we're now at the stage where the County Council have done their review of it, and we've been looking at the Gold Award, and we're hoping to submit that by the end of June as well. And we'll see how successful we are in achieving the Gold Award. And finally, it was to audit contractors into their high-risk areas. So I completed 2 audits of Streetwise. One was manual handling, which we did in January this year, and the second one took place in June, and that covered personal protective equipment that Streetwise provide their staff. Okay. The next slide is just to look at some of the training that was provided. This is only the training that is organised through the HR, through myself. So there's other training that takes place within the departments, especially our high-risk areas like R2Go. The middle column just shows you the numbers of people that successfully attended the training, and then in some of them, like the fire safety e-learning, for example, the asterisk figure is how many people have completed that training this year, and the figure in brackets just shows you how many have completed it within the last 3 years, because we aim for people to complete training on a 3-yearly basis, so it's not necessarily important that they've completed it within the last 12 months, but have completed it within the last within the 3-year period. And the final column just shows you the percentage of completions for each of those training courses. And then go on to look at the accident forms that have been completed within the 12-month period. Just really to note from this that the number of accidents to employees has decreased slightly again this year, from 69 last year to from 19 last year to 17 this year. Significant decrease in the accidents relating to the depot, and there's been an increase in accidents within the community facilities. These were mainly at Rushcliffe Country Park. 4 of those 5 accidents were involving volunteers, and we've been doing a lot of work recently at the Country Park along making sure that we're doing as much health and safety support for the volunteers as we are for our own employees. The bottom rate is just looking at incident rates. It just helps to show the difference in figures, because obviously if you look at the establishment count over the year, the number of employees has reduced every year. So the incident rate is a way of looking at a comparable figure from year to year. Okay, this slide is just to look at the accident forms by type. So we've split those 17 accidents into accident types. Key points to consider within this table is that there's been a significant decrease in slip, trips and falls compared to last year, but last year did seem to have a bit of a spike, and there's been an increase in animal attacks. On this occasion we had 4 dog bites to employees within the 12-month period. Number of days absence, so this is looking at how many days absent from our employees have had as a result of an accident at work. So this last 12 months, we've had 99 days off. And if you look at those figures, they do fluctuate year on out. So we sometimes have a good year and then a bad year and then a good year and a bad year. The average across those years is 118 days off over the 12-month period. What I have done is just shown you those lost time injuries. So we only actually had 3 accidents within the 12-month period where somebody had some time off work. The manual handling incident with the 68 days, that was something where an employee had an accident at work in May 2017. They returned back to work, but then in this 12-month period had a operation on the shoulder that was injured. So we have actually counted that against this year's figures. Whether we should do or not is questionable, but it's so you've got all that information in there. So that took, of those 99 days, that was a significant proportion of those days. So that was just to kind of give you an overview of the accidents to our employees. Then we've got accidents to public, very low, with just 7 accident forms completed for members of the public. These varied across our sites, but majority of them are at Rushcliffe Country Park. There was a dog bite, there was 2 slips and trips which weren't related to the environment in any way, and a couple of play-related accidents. So there was no significant accidents to our employees that that have been reported to us. Okay, so that's what I wanted to bring to your attention. So I don't know whether you have any questions for me.
I'm going to ask 2 questions which I asked for clarification on, and so other people may be the same as me. You put water safety awareness. By that, are we talking about drinking water, or are we talking about swimming pool, or what are we talking about?
Yeah, so that water safety awareness is for our staff that get involved in dealing with flooding. So it's how to make sure that when we send people out doing sandbags, getting involved in supporting the community in a flooding incident, that they don't put themselves at risks. So it's around making sure that they know how to drive and not to drive through excessive flood water, that when they're walking to properties through flood water, that they're not putting themselves at risk. So how to use a wading pole and what equipment to wear and things like that. So it covers a whole raft of sort of support for our staff that get involved in flooding.
Right. And it's the first time I've really scrutinised a report like this, and table of accidents for Leisure Centre, 394. That to me sounds horrendous.
Yeah. If you compare it to the incident rate, so if you look at the number of users that are coming into the premises and the number of accidents, it is actually extremely low from that point of view. So it does sound a lot. To put it into perspective, there's only 2 of those accidents that were reportable. So a lot of the accidents that we get within leisure centres are play-related accidents. So it's people banging each other's heads when they're swimming, backstroked, or a sporting injury whilst they're playing squash and they've run into the wall or tripped over something, that kind of thing. So only 2 of them being reportable, and they're the serious ones that need to be reported to the Health and Safety Executive. So,
should we not actually, if 2 are reportable, should we not actually be putting another column which says reportable accidents?
The column, so it probably isn't clear to you, and apologies for the fact that it's got the terminology. The column that says RIDOR stands for Reporting of Injuries and Dangerous Occurrence Regulations, which are the set of legislation that are the reportable ones. So that isn't clear on the report, so I do apologise for that, but the column with RIDOR shows you where those reportable accidents are.
Okay. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions, if I may. So going back to the table of staff training,
Yeah.
under first aid refresher, and evac chair training, just to pick two out, the amount of staff attended, just low in terms of numbers of the team we have, and obviously saying 100%. What is that based on in terms of we believe we only had 2 people we wanted to train, or 2 people we felt we need to train out of the percentage of staff?
So with respect to first aid training and the evac chair training, we've got more people trained in first aid. The first aid certificates expire on a 3-yearly basis. So they were the people that required their refresher training in that 12-month period. Nobody else has had it expired. So the rest of them are still in date, and they are first aiders, if that makes sense. So we've got, I don't know off the top of my head, probably about 20, probably more than that actually. We've got some emergency first aiders. So for example, down at within R2Go, we've got a lot of the crew members that are out and about, so that they can administer first aid on their crew. And we've probably got about 20 office-based staff that are first aid trained. So this figure just shows the number of people who required the refresher training in that 12-month period.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up.
Sorry?
Just a quick follow-up, if I can, just quick on that one. So, in terms of evac chair training before, the question I'm just asking, because I do evac training with a job, and you can obviously you can get people trained to do the training, obviously, as you'll obviously know. So, for best practice, it would not be best to get a lot more people trained on evac chair training. I was thinking, if there was ever a fire or an accident and trying to get people down the stairs, it is a challenging thing to do after the training, and in terms of getting people into that chair. So whether we should get a lot more people trained to potentially assist, and have we got on site, because the cost to train is actually relatively low, I'd say, if you've got someone trained to do it. And I think for best practice, get more people trained. So I'd like to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'm a trained trainer for the evac chair. So I deliver that training in-house. It's changed significantly since we've moved to this building, because we've got 1 flight of stairs, so we've only got 1 evac chair that relates to the office environment. The leisure centre's got their side, and they've got their evac chair trained staff and evac chairs there, so they've got that side. So with respect to our side, we've only got 1 evac chair for the 1 set of stairs, and because we've got a significant number of people who now remote work, what we have done is we use our business support unit. So we've got a team of 15 staff who work within the BSU team. So they're dedicated office-based staff, so that we know that in the event of an emergency, there's always going to be the BSU team within the building. So what we've chose to do is to train the staff within the BSU team, so that if is a need for an evacuation and somebody needs the support of the evac chair, we've always got a evac chair trained person on site at all times. There are more than 4 people trained. Again, that was people who required the refresher training. In the past, we've trained significantly more people in the old civic building, because we had so many more floors. And
if I can just add to that, Chairman, in the old civic building, our public chamber was on the 3rd floor, so we don't have members of the public going upstairs anymore. As a rule, the old building, we were on the 3rd floor, and when we had evening meetings with councillors, members of the public, all the exec management team were trained in evac chair. So we spent many an hour on the back stairs with the evac chair. And we also, of course, we had the flats at the top. So we were in that building that had 7-8 stories. So we took a decision that when we moved here, we didn't need to have quite as many people trained. But some of us have got our old training as well. So if we needed to, we could step in.
But I would like to end the positive, Chair. We should say it's great to see 17 people trained on mental health first aid. I think that's something which.
Sorry, sir.
I would say on the positive and the mental health first aid. It's great to see 17 people trained in that, because that's actually one area which a lot of businesses aren't quite up to where they should be on that. I think it's great to see we've got a lot of people trained in that area.
Yeah. If I can just add to that with Joe on the mental health first aid training, We had a really, really useful course on that 2 or 3 months ago. Members of staff who were keen to get involved in that took part in that training, and we're going to do a little bit of follow-up training on that, related to 2 specific areas. One being supporting people through who are experiencing grief, which of course is something that we all experience, but it can be quite challenging going back to work following a bereavement, and also the other area is it's when you've been involved in a serious incident. What's the phrase? Trauma.
Yeah, trauma.
Yes. So again, looking to have that support, that training available, because as you know, or some members know, through the work that we do with emergency planning, there could be situations where members of staff do come into contact with and are involved in very serious incidents and accidents.
Can I just say, when you were saying that these were the number of people who were training, there are other people who are already trained. To the unknowledgeable eye, those who haven't been here at this meeting,
Yeah.
it doesn't give the right picture. Again, I'd say, is it possible to have another column which says total trained? Which says how many within the organisation are trained, and then the figures start to make a bit more sense.
Yeah, I can certainly look at that, which is why I think that's why we put the column in at the end, because obviously things like health and safety induction, for example, is a one-off training. So all staff, when they come in, should sit on that induction course. So the aim is that within that year that 100% of people who should have attended will have attended. So obviously I couldn't give you a figure. Well, I could give you a figure for how many people have gone through the induction, but it's infinite. It would go on because every year we do that training. So, but for some of the training that's got like the 3-year refresher on it, I could give a bit more of a feel for how many people we've actually got overall.
Yeah. Because
I think a bit like I've done in the brackets for the e-learning, showing you a total figure. So where it's appropriate, I can look at giving that total figure for some of the other areas as well.
So, Councillor Clark, I think you wanted to say.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, just wanted to refer to the depot. Obviously, the figures in 4.1 is a downward trend, which is extremely welcome on the number of accidents, so it's generally going down. However, in that context, there are 2 questions. Firstly, the table 4.4 on page 6, which all relate to R2Go and the slips and manual handling and general injuries. Is that included in the depot? So is it both injuries actually in the depot and out on the working the streets, if I could term it that way? And the supplementary to that is, on page 7, 6.4, we refer to the fact that we're relocated to Eastcroft. So do we still have the same influence in Eastcroft depot that we have had ourselves working in our own depot, or are we, in other words, are we looking after our own staff in Eastcroft, or are we relying on the City Council to look after them?
Okay, so the answer to your first question, which I'm now got blank on.
It's about whether the injuries were just in the depot, or whether they included out on the vehicles.
So all of those accident figures are for our employees whilst in our employment, so it's irrelevant as to where they're employed, where they're doing their work. So a majority of the R2Go and the depot accidents aren't at the depot site. Very, very few accidents actually at the depot site. A majority of our depot accidents are to our depot employees out and about doing their daily job. So, so yes, they're included when they're out and about, and the slips and trips and the shoulder injuries and those sort of things are whilst they're in the public place doing their refuse collection. Okay. The second question around the Eastcroft depot, prior to the move, we've worked with the health and safety team at the city to make sure that we're aware of their site rules and that we're abiding by their site rules. So they've got rules in place with respect to vehicle washing, filling up the vehicles with diesel, their road traffic one-way systems, and all those things. We were made aware of those site rules so that we could implement them with our staff. However, there's certain parts of health and safety that we're responsible for, obviously within our own containment, within our own building at Eastcroft, with respect to things like slips and trips and that kind of thing. Then we're responsible for our own health and safety for our staff there. I do plan this year to go and audit with the City Council Health and Safety Advisor down there, so we'll do a joint audit down there to make sure that both sides are happy that how it's working at the moment is suitable and sufficient, really. So I don't know whether you've got anything to add on that, Dave.
Does anybody else have any questions? Well, in that event, the recommendation, which you'll find on page 1, we had to consider the detailed information contained in the report, which we have now done, and note the significant progress made against the goals and objectives agreed by corporate governance in the financial year 2018-19. Well, we've done that. And endorse proposed health and safety objectives set out for 2019-20. Is everyone happy with that? Thank you. Right, so we now move on to implementation of change. A verbal update will be provided by the Services Manager for Finance and Corporate Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to refer back to point 1 of your terms of reference, which is about overseeing the transformation of scrutiny throughout this year. So the purpose of this section, which you'll have noticed from your work programme moving forward, appears on every agenda, is to just give you a quick update of how that's going. And clearly, obviously, in further sessions, there'll be an opportunity for you to feedback from your own perspective as to how things are going within your own groups. But just briefly for today, terms of reference and new members have all been appointed to the scrutiny groups. That was done in May at Annual Council. The Your Role in Scrutiny induction session has been delivered and was well attended. We've established a contact with Charnwood Borough Council providing informal support throughout the transition year. Scrutiny training is booked for the 17th of July. It's going to be delivered by East Midlands Councils and will be tailored to Rushcliffe Borough Council and our scrutiny structure. That will also go through the role and remit of each of the individual groups, and there'll be opportunities there to discuss what we decide on this evening in terms of work programme and such like. And today, Councillor Campbell and I have attended a scrutiny symposium in London to hear about the new statutory guidance for overview and scrutiny, which was published in the middle of May, and I'll circulate this document tomorrow. It's very, very worth reading, and I'll leave Councillor come back to feedback on the day as you saw it.
Well, yes, it was the most interesting part, I think, was the networking, talking to other officers and councillors and hearing how things went within their organisations. Some were good stories, some were not so good stories, some were horrific. And so I come back with quite a raft of ideas, etc., which I want to assimilate and go through. And maybe we'll have got that into some sort of order to be able to present to you on the 17th of July. I don't really want to talk off the cuff at this moment in time because I haven't really had time to sit down and get my ducks in a row. So, but yes, it was a very busy session, and yes, we got back by the skin of our teeth. You just said about how we're going to approach scrutiny and how this is new. This format is new. And I want to see this in a much more upbeat way. You won't be aware of how scrutiny was previously, so this will be this is fine. This is new to you, but I want the topics to be much more punchy, much more focused. And if I could say to the officers, can we have much more focused reports? I'd really like to see no more than 2 pages with bullet points in them, so that you could pick up that paper and you could say, oh, I know what that's about. Because it stands at the moment, we get acres of paperwork, which actually we're now getting on our devices, and you have to go through all of that. And I'm afraid you lose the will to live. So we need it needs to be much more punchy, much more directed, much more focused, but that won't be an excuse for piling everything into an appendix either. So that is what I'm wanting at the moment. I think that really, I'd like to say that I'm not, and I don't think my fellow chairmen are happy with the number of meetings we've got at the moment that we've scheduled. I don't think we feel that is going to be sufficient to cover the topics, but not only that, the gap between the meetings is such that you lose momentum, and you really need to keep that going forward, and we need to keep the pace up, and that's more what I'm concerned about. Well, you know, I'm not happy that we're not getting a meeting until September, October. I'm concerned about what we might have lost in the meantime, or what we should have picked up. So those are my concerns. But yeah, I just want to make sure that the meetings people want to come to them, even want to come and listen, because there's something happening. What's the council doing? Okay, so that's all I have to say there. Had you finished? You had, right? Okay. Well, now we move on to.
So just on the 17th of July meeting, there will be a 10-minute slot for each of the chairs to, feedback from this meeting in terms of where things are going, which links to the next item particularly, but also there's a chance obviously to interact more with your particular members of your groups as well at the same meeting. So that'll give some opportunity there for further discussion and debate.
Okay. So now we're moving into what is very important, and that's the creation of the work programme. As you probably saw from your agenda, officers have already scoped out some topics, and at the moment we have allocated them to certain groups. Now, following on from my wanting things to be a bit different, I have, because as I say, people pick up these documents and they think, oh gosh, yeah, right, and you become word blind. And I'm wondering if you could do the equivalent of a spider graph, because these topics are enormous. So what I was going to write this out properly on the train, but there was no chance of doing that. So it's a scribbled, and I could do with a flip chart almost to write it on. That is the Growth and Development Group. And under it is the topic, economic development. Economic development is a big subject, and there are various elements to economic development. There are growth boards, there's employment provision, sites existing and future, high street vibrancy, shopfront grants, what the take-up is, marketing of investment properties to employers and residents. They're areas that could be dealt with individually. At this stage, I don't know whether that will all be dealt with by your group, if that's what you want to do. I'll be reliant on you tell me how you want to deal with this, or whether we should set up a working group just to deal with one of those topics, nice and quickly, feed it back to keep the interest. These are only ideas at the moment. It's not something that I'm, saying that's what we've got to do. But I just want to keep this moving, rolling, all the time. And the other thing about that, whilst I was doing this, I suddenly realised within those subjects there are reports that could be written by officers that actually feed into other topics, because employment provision hits broadband. So broadband also comes into supporting and promoting vibrancy in towns and villages. So that report might well be written and could be used at both of those scrutiny meetings. So that could actually save some officer time. But it's something that would need to be looked at.
I think what you said is very useful, and one of the things that we have perhaps struggled with in the past is when items go on scrutiny, what particular aspect of that subject is being looked at. Yeah. Now, I don't want to dampen anyone's enthusiasm whatsoever, but I do have to say that we have got a finite resource as far as supporting lots of different officer groups, member groups, beg your pardon, and the amount of officer time that can go into that, as well as providing the services of the council. However, I think what there's an opportunity here to do is for the lead officers to work with the chairman and vice chairman to really get the detail of what can be scrutinised on that subject. And it may be that we move from previously having quite busy agendas at times, where we for councillors who are new to scrutiny, we always used to have at least 2 subjects and sometimes 3 external visitors, and by the end of the 2 hours everyone was exhausted. But what we could look to do is, taking your example of economic growth or economic development in the borough, is spend the whole 2-hour session on one subject and go into more detail and work with councillors on that and how you want to do that. And I think some of the items that we've got on the as examples on the agenda will take more than one meeting.
Oh, it will.
Very much so.
Definitely, and they go on and on.
Exactly.
Carbon management.
Well, yes.
2050.
You'll still be doing when I'm dead and buried.
So there is flexibility in how we do that. The setting up of member groups, we do need to be very focused about that. We've got, as you've already referred to, we've got the growth boards that are being resourced as well, but we've also got certainly one specific member group at the moment doing a very detailed piece of work. They will be doing a detailed piece of work around the Bingham Leisure Centre and wider development on that Bingham site. So I don't want to say we can't do them, but I just caution that we have to be mindful of how much additional resource we can put into them as outside the main scrutiny meetings.
Yes, I think we are very aware of the resources that we've got, and we need to maximise what we've got and get the best results. Yeah. And like I said, if we can utilise a report from one item somewhere else, then that actually saves some time. And obviously, if they're not going to be writing great big lengthy reports, they won't take it so much time.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, I mean you're right on that, but there's still the detail.
Still the research.
That if you want to do a lot of looking into the detail of what's delivered on the economic development within the borough, that's not just what's delivered by the council; it's what's delivered by partners. There is that background data that needs collecting to give you a thorough scrutiny experience.
Right. Okay, so what we need to look at is you need to have looked at the topics and have decided in your head where they're going to fit into the timetable, the work programme. So, would one of you like to? Councillor Clark?
Do you want to kick off? Can do. Growth and development. Well, if you probably use page 16, appendix 3 as the aid memoir, if I can put it that way. These are potential topics for us to look at, although perhaps if I just preface this by saying I have had a conversation with Mr. Mitchell about, because by virtue of the comments that were made about number of meetings, when it comes to the first formal meeting in October, we want to hit the ground running and be working the moment we've walked in. Therefore, I have asked for if you like, a preliminary meeting sometime early-ish September, so that we can have introductions and preliminaries and set out what we're going to be working on, so that come October we can be straight in. So, subject to that discussion and discussion tonight, Abbey Road Depot redevelopment is something that is time sensitive and not scrutinising the actual decision, because that's a cabinet decision that will take place, but ensuring that the things that are included within that redevelopment are there and included, so that when it actually goes out for promotion and marketing, that there's a clear sense as to what the council's ambitions were when they wanted it redeveloped. So I'll just emphasise, we're not scrutinising the decision, because the decision will be made in the cabinet on the 9th of July, whenever it is. But when it comes to developers actually purchasing it, assuming that it is going to be purchased by somebody else, then we want to be sure that our aspirations as a council are portrayed in that marketing and whatever conditions and whatever is put on that sale. So that'll be the first one. The second and third one, which are probably related, are economic development, which is the first item listed on that, and the business support offer, and then supporting and promoting economic vibrancy, which I think are interconnected. They're very much cross-cutting, and so that is possibly or potentially one for the next meeting in January. And then in the third meeting, customer service and digital transformation, which is the fourth item. Having said all that, the other thing which I think is important that we do look at, if you go down the table a bit, it says delivery of strategic sites and then a bit later infrastructure development. I think it is important that we do actually look at the way in which, and the process and the way in which we identify infrastructure that is required on our strategic sites, to ensure that we are making best use of getting hold of, whether it in time will be SIL, but the Section 106 monies, and connected with that is ensuring or looking at and scrutinising how we engage with our partners, and obviously County Council is a prime one, in terms of ensuring that Section 106 requests, demands, requirements, whatever, however you want to term it, that we are looking at the process, the timing of that, and are we engaging with our partners sufficiently to ensure that we have those Section 106 requests in place. So that will have to be put in at the moment. Well, it's up for debate as to where we put that in. It'll depending on the workload as opposed to the work programme. And coupled with that is the SIL scheme, which I think we need to be looking at in terms of the process, because I think there seems to be some clarity required as to how much engagement there's been on the development of the SIL scheme, which is due for adoption possibly in September if all the information's gathered together, but of which I think we should be looking at how the process was arrived at and whether in fact, assuming that adoption takes place, probably an early sight of how it is going and whether it needs reviewing, because from what I've seen, obviously I don't, at this stage don't want to get into detail, but it just seems a bit strange to me how some of the process has been arrived at. But it's going to be difficult to look at that before the actual adoption. I hope that makes some sense. Yeah. But to be fair to Leanne, I've already had this discussion with Dave Mitchell, so he already knows I was going to say that, so it's not a surprise. I think that's possible. I don't know, there's anything.
No, very comprehensive.
Right. So at this moment in time, we're looking at September, October for Abbey Road, economic development and supporting and promoting economic vibrancy for January.
Yeah.
Where do you see the SIL coming? Because it's urgent by the sounds of it.
It is urgent at the moment, but I suspect that if we can't look at it and if it all gets decided by September, then it's then a question of maybe, more like looking at it in March as to how's the early implementation gone. The difficulty is, and the reason I feel there's urgency, is because there's an awful lot of development, large-scale sites coming up now, that if we wait and review the scheme and find we want to adjust it, we may find that some of those sites are lost out. So there is a certain amount of urgency.
Can I make a suggestion? What we could do is put that as a item on the first meeting alongside the Abbey. I mean, do the Abbey Road item. That's your substantive item, and then I think you've probably got enough space to do two items, Abbey Road, and start looking at that. Your economic development item is a big item, but you could bring the Section 106/SIL item into the first meeting, just so that you know that you're picking it up early on.
I think. I mean, I don't know enough about SIL, if I'm honest with you. I'm interested to see what the report says at full council in September, but no doubt when that comes out, that will generate some of that work programme, I suspect, in terms of how that's going to progress and where that timetable fits.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I've been concerned that since raising it with Dave Mitchell, some of the detail has come to light which I wasn't aware of, and I have to say, although it's been said that it's gone out to consultation, there are other organisations that weren't aware of stuff in the SIL proposals, and some of the process or the configuration being used is based on old information relating to old ward boundaries that were superseded, where are we, is it 4 years ago or 8 years ago?
4 years ago.
So that seems a bit odd to me that we are trying to use a new scheme based on at least 4-year-old information, which is now out of date.
it is a set process that has to be followed with the consultation. You know, it is the team that do this, they follow the guidelines. Sometimes they might seem a bit odd and they might be out of sync with how things are, but they have to follow a set process. But I think if we bring it in September, October, whenever that first meeting was, that gives an opportunity for you and your colleagues to make those points.
Councillor Brennan, was there anything you wanted to add to that before we leave?
No, that's fine.
Leave your group then. Okay. Move across to Councillor Purdue-Horan. Yours tends to be to follow a set programme. What I would like to see is to make sure that within the Treasury Management outturn that there are regular reviews of the investment portfolio and commercial activity.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'm perhaps myself and Councillor Walker are a bit more fortunate than Councillor Clark and Brennan in that, if you look at the draft work programme for corporate, I could still call it corporate governance scrutiny, it is essentially set out by almost statutory items. But we actually have an opportunity to look at the work programme in more detail with Mr Linfield in a couple of weeks for our briefing before our July meeting. And of course we've got an exciting event coming up. I always look forward to it with our friend from Arling Close, our Treasury Management Advisor, who's giving the annual presentation in September.
Been two this year, actually.
Oh, excellent.
Even more exciting now.
And I'll be encouraging all councillors to come along with that, because it does actually give an excellent, she's obviously an expert in her field, and it does give us all a great insight into the current issues nationally as well as relating to Rushcliffe. So I think our immediate work programme is pretty much sort of about there, really, and I'm looking forward to the next 12 months.
Just to follow up, the first comments about the commercialism agenda, that will, as part of the new Sitford Code on Treasury, we do have to report now on commercialism. So I think certainly Councillor Clark, when you've attended, you've had the fortune of attending governance, or corporate governance as it was called, that we do talk about commercial investments and report on where those are going. In fact, as well, at the next meeting where we talk on the annual report on Treasury, we'll focus on commercialism and a couple of the investments that we've made. So there's some really exciting stuff there. The other thing, I suppose, the other comment is, whilst we obviously, and it goes for everyone really, whilst obviously we've got you're setting up your programmes, these things aren't set in stone. There will be, fluidity as we go along. Things change. So certainly in the past, I won't say it was particularly exciting, but things like the Constitution review, that sits with governance. So there will be other things as well. But as you say, we'll talk through as things change, and as something could come out from, I don't know, an external audit or internal audit. There may be things that we need that need looking at.
It's an evolutionary process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Councillor Walker, did you wish to add anything? No? Okay. Councillor Wheeler.
You see, absolutely.
The best till last.
Absolutely. So, obviously, in terms of what's been set on the agenda, there's two main items, two key items to look at that's been addressed as this year programme. So, you've got the carbon management plan. Obviously, that's quite time sensitive, given that we've got to obviously report back. I think it's by March 2020, which so that's not giving me a lot of time to go there. And 2030 isn't that far away, and I think we've got to make sure that we don't get to 2029 suddenly panicking, spend lots of money to meet it. We want to make sure we're reviewing this plan now and getting plans in place. So we'd already discussed. Obviously, I've had a meeting with Mr. Banks, as helpful as always. You can pay him £5 later. In terms of going through what we're going to look at, I think we're both in agreement that has to be. Yeah, absolutely. Well, a little expensive. I could go on that one. and so I think we're both very much in agreement for that to be on the first meeting that we go through. Myself and Val, we discussed it earlier. So we're agreeing with that as well. So I mean that's key. That's got to be on our meeting, our first meeting. But one that's obviously on the community partnership. I think potentially that could be a fluid one, whether we're looking at the first meeting or second meeting, because since the decision has got to go back for October, we may wait to get a bit more time with since it's been relatively new under Trent Bridge Trust, to give perhaps a bit more time so we've got a bit more data to look at. I think that's one where we'll sort of look and see whether that should potentially be pushed back to later in the year. You know, we'll meet with obviously Dave, September time, we can review it then, see whether when it's suitable to go on there. Potentially one we may have to move forward or add on there is the leisure strategy review. So obviously potentially with the Luttrell Hall marketing exercise, it might be pertinent, depending on the timescales of the marketing exercise, to look at that in the first meeting, to obviously look at our strategy, whether disposing potentially of Luttrell, if that was the decision that came back, would that be in line with our strategy where we should be looking at various options. I think especially with the current feeling from members of the public and with our commitment to the borough in providing the leisure strategy, that's probably one we should probably maybe put on September and push back the community partnership review to January, February. So I think, like I say, it's a bit fluid. We've got to make sure. I think we don't want to commit to it now and then suddenly realise there's no point doing an item in September. It may work for October. So I don't want to cast set in stone now. It'll be something that we'll keep engaging with officers about to make sure we get the right order there. Potentially the car management plan we may look at, do we have to expand that to look at things like the tree policy? So obviously last year the council spent a lot of money, obviously free trees to go out, which is great, but do we need to look at, do we do it the right way? Potentially that meeting with our commitment to not only premium carbon footprint, but you know, in terms of our whole environmental strategy, which has also been something key that the council has been talking about for over 12 months now. So we'll see what's at the time effective. So we may look at expanding that item on there to incorporate that in other items. And I know you talk about waste and recycling strategy. Again, that's on there as potentially not this year. Obviously, we are very much dependent on the national strategy. There's obviously talk with the current government on changes, but I've a slight feeling that may change. I don't know why it makes me think that. So again, at the same time, we don't want to put that onto an agenda and then realise it's a bit of a waste of time and look at that again. So again, like I say, it's a lot with our warfare. I think a lot of it is quite fluid. We've got to make sure again we look at the right time. So we're not going to, like I say, put it cast in stone yet, but we will keep reviewing it. Don't know if you have anything to add on that, Val?
I think that's right.
In the light of what you were talking about with regard to leisure and Luttrell Hall, I think within that we should be looking at the provision of community hall facilities across the borough.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about, the whole community strategies. Like
Yes, exactly.
Again, we can look at incorporating, is it, with that given adverse impact on surrounding areas,
Yeah.
gaps in community hall, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of gaps in community hall, and
Yeah.
that potentially make that then unviable there at the same time. So I think if we want to look at that overall. So.
With regard to young and positive futures, isn't there a time on that?
Yes,
Thought-
2020 that we.
Is it?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. We may look at January for every time because.
Oh,
we
right.
decided to say September
That's
3
all right.
years ago, so.
Okay.
Sorry, the reason it is early is more linked to the budget process. So we've got to make sure whatever decisions taken will feed through that, which has obviously got to be approved by, the draft budget will be going to Cabinet in February, so hence it's in a bit earlier.
Right. Okay. So, yes, Councillor Bansal, have you any comments? No? Right. Anybody else? Any comments they want to make on the Future Work Programme? Oh,
Yeah, just a quick one, Madam Chair. So, absolutely, in terms of carbon management, the first meeting will be about a health check as to, we have a carbon management plan at the moment. Is it fit for purpose? What are the gaps? What are the issues? Where do we need to be spending our energy and our resources in terms of hitting that 2030 deadline? And also that will then influence the report to Cabinet in March, because clearly if it's not feasible, then that needs to be reported back to Cabinet. So it's going to be a really important meeting to ascertain, in October, how, is it feasible to hit that 2030 motion that was passed at full council? And then added to that, as Pete's just said, the actual community, it's actually the Positive Futures runs out the agreement in December 2020. So I think we've probably got to focus on that on October to give a steer as to you know, what we're going to do. Yeah.
Councillor Clark, you indicated.
Thank you. Just because we had a conversation before the meeting regarding the LEP and whether we ought to be looking at our engagement with the LEP and whether we are getting out of that organisation what we need to be getting out in terms of investment, and it may well come under growth and development. It probably is the most appropriate, but you know, are we getting what we ought to be getting out of the LEP? Investment, funding, infrastructure, in the, you know, the whole context, the whole widest aspect of it.
This was one of the table topics at the meeting today.
Can I? Thank you very much. I think that is a very good one to include in your economic development meeting, because we can certainly provide the detail of what the structure is, what happens at the moment, how we're engaged, the funding that comes in and out of the LEP at that meeting as part of that debate at that meeting. Whether you then want any more detail following that, we can take from there, but we can certainly include that in that economic growth item that you've got.
That would be good. Right, is everybody happy with that then? Officers as well as councillors?
Sorry, Madam Chairman, can I just ask you to just take a look at the draft work programme for this group?
Of course,
just because we haven't discussed that one at all.
No, I'm forgetting about us. Yes. Right. Yes, well, here we are today at the top of the programme. Something that I noticed on the programme is the corporate strategy, and that, as we've gone through, we've got that on the agenda today. Should we not be looking at that again probably on February? Or is it an annual? Do we do it annually?
I think that very much depends, Madam Chairman, on what do you mean by look at it again. If you're thinking about monitoring our progress towards it, actually that's your performance management reports that come to each meeting. So
Right.
we talk about how we're doing in terms of the tasks and the corporate scorecard.
Yes.
So you get that information, and then in terms of reviewing that progress, I think it would depend on how that was going.
So we'll be getting that. What does that come under then, and where?
It comes under your financial and performance management report that's there for each meeting.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Well, our work programme, as it sits at the moment, is a rolling programme. It's very fluid at the moment. We can't nail anything down until we start, until the other groups start, and we see what's coming forward, and we liaise with Cabinet, and so it's very fluid at the moment. So I would say, yes, happy with that as an outline, and we can fill it in and work with it and move it about and do whatever is necessary. So I'm quite happy with that. Was everybody happy with the scoping of the topics, by the way, as far as they have gone? We obviously don't want to get into detail about anything tonight because that's not what we're here for, but everyone was quite happy with that. Very good.
The only thing I just noticed was, can I just query the dates on the side? Because the dates down there, the Thursday, the 3rd of September, but it's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, well spotted.
Scrutiny.
Exactly, absolutely, yeah. Go to the top of the class.
Glasses.
We'll add the calendar and onto the on the governance agenda and management topics.
Yes,
I
exactly.
wasn't quite sure about
So that should say Tuesday. Thank you very much.
And whoever compiled the dates, can we scrutinise their employment contract?
That comes under the terms of the head of paid service.
physical friend, this is.
Right, I think we've fulfilled the recommendation, and we've agreed the topics, and we've agreed the work programme. So we will move on to the corporate strategy.
Okay. So I'll take this, Chair.
Right.
So hopefully you've had time to read the paper amongst all the other papers. As you're aware, the current strategy expires on the 31st of March 2020, and we've already discussed the fact that the environment we are working in is very fluid, and the strategy has to evolve. So hence we've got the draft strategy now at pages 37 to 54. One update really is that there's been a sort of a steer from the leader really in Cabinet, and that they are looking at having a fourth objective. So if you look on page 46, you'll see the the objectives. You've got there, it says efficient services, quality of life and sustainable growth. And now we've just mentioned that the environment, and so Cabinet would like a fourth one, which is the environment, to go on there as a specific objective. And affect what we'll be doing, obviously within largely probably in the quality of life section is a lot of the environmental type things. So there will be some cutting and pasting, if you like, of this strategy and pigeonholing the relevant areas that relate to the environment, and to pull that out as another section there. Going back to the fact, I was just thinking this when we were talking about the agenda. I know we've got a meeting in early September, and it might be perhaps when we've rejigged it all, perhaps to bring the strategy again back with the in terms of how it would look once it's all been rejigged.
Because as it says, it's a living strategy, it's evolving all the time and changing.
Yes.
So yes, so we need to keep.
So we can see what those changes are. So that was the main point I was going to make, and it's really whether anyone else has got any other comments on the current iteration of the strategy.
I have, which I've already discussed with you both, but obviously not with everybody else. Our journey since 2016. I don't know whether anyone you can bring that up, which is the snake. It's not accurate at the moment. Sharp Hill is in the wrong place. Councillor Robinson was elected in 2017. Planning Peer Challenge was February 2017. The Arena was January 2017. So I want that looking at. It's not right. And I also have another comment on, as well as achieving all this, did you know that in the last year Rushcliffe did, and it's got the picture of the bin and house and a hand, and you brought those little icons up. The little house on the far right says we helped 180 people who are homeless or at risk of becoming so to find homes. We need to reword that, because to the man in the street, that's saying there were 180 homeless people in Rushcliffe, which was not so. I believe it was 5, it's now 2, and those 2 do not want to be given help or rehomed, if I'm correct.
I think what it's talking about is the fact that without our intervention, those people could have been homeless.
I understand that.
So
somehow we need to reword that to say what you've just said, but looking at it straight on, it would appear to be saying that there were 180 homeless.
Well, could I just suggest, Madam Chairman, it helped 180 people who were at risk of becoming homeless.
Exactly.
Which is a different angle.
Yeah. I think it's important because that's a bit of a reputational matter.
Can I just check? You mentioned page 43. My appendix has only got 18 pages. Is there two appendices?
And the page numbers don't match up from the report to the actual report.
This is the page number of the whole agenda, not of the appendix.
Sorry, yeah.
All right. Councillor Wheeler.
Just to clarify on one part, which is the Relocate Community Centre in West Bridgford. So it's saying 2019. The information I'd seen was that the police were moving out 2020. Just want to check whether are we looking to move out earlier than that, or is that sort of potentially changed at the moment to 2020?
Where are you looking?
On page 52 of the report there, Relocate Community Centre in West Bridgford. And just ask that, I mean, I'm sure it'll be cabinet or a delegated decision, but see whether there's going to be any scrutiny on the location. I know it's very hard in terms of finding a commercial premises in the centre of West Bridgford, but at the same time, it's obviously very important to members of the public in West Bridgford that it's accessible. Obviously, the community centre is ideally located, especially for those who are potentially a bit more vulnerable or disabled to be able to get there clearly. So, see what, for the 2 point question, really how we look at that.
Thank you. Yes, I think 2019 is ambitious. I think you are correct. The notice that we've been served is to vacate by 2020. However, that's August 2020, and we wouldn't necessarily be leaving at the end of July. So it could well be early 2020. But I think you're right. I think 2019 is probably unrealistic. The question about the question about the options, where are we going to go and will they be looked at, is a very good question. We have, Leanne, and in particular Leanne and I have been working on looking at various options, some of which have been and gone, or been discounted for various reasons. We are hoping to bring a report to Cabinet in July with a recommendation. Now, that's dependent on our recommendation being available. So, as you can imagine, with looking at options of where we might go, and some of those may involve leasing premises, time is everything. But hopefully we'll bring something to Cabinet in July.
Thank you. Councillor Brenner.
Thank you. One minor point. Can we decide if borough's got a capital B or not?
Yes,
because
it
it's
has.
inconsistent throughout the report. The more substantive point. You talked earlier about reporting back on the delivery of this plan, and you said the data would be contained in the performance report that comes regularly to the meeting. Is that against the corporate action plan objectives as set out? Do we report against those directly?
We report against the progress of the tasks contained in the action plan, but we also have what's called a corporate scorecard, which is a basket of indicators that is to be determined at this particular point in time.
And is that, are you saying then we would receive both of those sets of information?
You would indeed.
Thank you.
That is subject to the 2-page limit, of course.
Right, so are we happy that we have reviewed that document and we would like to see the amendments, obviously, and that we agree well, we don't recommend the corporate strategy to Cabinet in its current format. We recommend it with the amendments.
Yeah. With it coming back to the next meeting.
Yes. Oh, which will be, yes. Yeah. Right.
Oh, excuse me, Madam Chair. So, what have I missed? When was it actually due formally to be adopted then? Or
full council in September?
It's going to full council in
It's
September.
September. All right.
yeah, so
it's going to come back
Yeah, well, it needs to be right then, doesn't it?
right at the beginning. Yes. All right. Is everybody happy with that? Right. So we now move to finance and performance monitoring, which is on page 55. I think that's probably you.
Yeah, well, I'll take this to start with, and then I'll let Sarah and Charlotte take over. Now, as you can see by the size of the report, when we talk about this two-page limitation, I think we might be struggling on this. So it might be, if it's not an appendix, it might be a presentation or something. I don't know, but
Well, that's okay, as long as you keep it nice and snappy and
yeah, well, we do that anyway. Well, yes, as always, as always.
fancy dress. We don't preclude that.
No, well, you want to see me in fancy dress. But anyway, so the report, obviously, just by way of background, particularly for the newer members, traditionally performance has gone to Performance Management Board and finance has gone to corporate governance. Now we have an amalgam of what are two extensive reports, which we will be looking at modifying, streamlining, well, very streamlining to get to the 2 pages, but it will be a more rationalised report than the one you've got here. So really we've had to do this just for as much for consistency in terms of how things have been reported during the last 12 months. So this is a cumulative, iterative process. So ordinarily, when you get at the next meeting, you'll have the first quarter's information, and the idea then is when you get that information, that may raise questions, you know, and potentially add fuel to the fire for in terms of what scrutiny wants to look at in terms of those particular questions, or you know, so that's how it should work. As well as that, it's always good to report performance and finance together, because normally you do get there should be some relationship between the two. So the best example is on what was it I was talking about to you the other day? I don't think there's sorry. That was it, fly tipping, yes, I just went out of my head. So fly tipping, so where we've had more fly tipping, that's hit the fly tipping budget in terms of the impact on the boroughs it has nationally. So, and that's where you get the relationship between those performance indicators and finance. So that's what it's all about. I'm just going to say a couple of comments overall about the overall report in terms of the outcomes of the report, and that I think it does highlight good performance by and large through most of the service areas, and as what we like to think is a very well run council, is what you'd expect, but we can't take that for granted. And also financially, whilst we are in a relatively stable financial position, again we cannot take that for granted because there's so much risk and challenge going forward in terms of things like business rates and the comprehensive spending review, which is probably not going to happen now this year, we don't think. So there's all these sort of challenges which muddy the water. So that's just my overall comments. But with that, I'll let Sarah talk through a bit more of the detail on finance, and Charlotte will on the performance side.
Thank you.
Thank you. So firstly, I'll talk about the revenue position, which the main variances are highlighted in the table on page 56. This shows an overall surplus of £228,000. It's due to various additional income streams, such as planning and also salary efficiencies. In paragraph 4.4, it focuses upon the 243 businesses that have benefited from the rate relief. It's been available since April 2018 and has cost us approximately £193,000. Paragraph 4.5 on page 57 focuses upon the 1.3 million that is going into reserves. There are a number of movements in the reserve that are explained within the bullets on page 57. There's still significant funding risk going forward, not least New Homes bonus, but the internal borrowing for the arena and the impact of losing the power station. More immediately and significantly through this is the uncertainty regarding the reviews of both the business rates and fairer funding, which Pete's previously mentioned, and also the comprehensive spending review in 2019. Table 2 highlights some carry forward requests
This is largely due to unspent money during 2018-19. And moving on to the capital position, it's summarised in Table 3, paragraph 4.7 explains much of the 18 million underspent position, and 50%, over 50% of this is due to a pause on the investments as we focus more on assets within the borough. And Appendix B at page 66 to 73 gives a further explanation on the variances within the capital programme. So overall, whilst the report demonstrates a healthy financial position, there's still many challenges and risks going forward. And with that, I'll hand over to Charlotte to focus on the performance aspects of the report.
Thank you very much. So those of you who are accustomed to receiving the performance report through PMB will see this as a very familiar document. What you have is a report that covers both our progress towards the corporate tasks from the old corporate strategy, the one that's now coming towards an end, and also our performance in terms of performance indicators against our targets that we set in the corporate scorecard. So the progress against the corporate tasks that officers have been working on over the last 3 years is contained in the table at 4.12, so that's pages 59 to 61. And as always, I'll be happy, with the support of my fellow officers here this evening, to answer any questions you have on that. There are a number of performance targets that were met at the end of the year, and Appendix C will show those in detail. There's quite a large number this year. I have one new exception at the end of Q4 to report on, which is the percentage of investment strategy committed. This is a slowdown, a purposeful slowdown in our investments outwardly in terms of the borough over the course of the last 12 months. This is so that we can make some inward investments, such as Bingham Leisure Centre and potentially the crematorium as well. So it's not a change of direction. It is not. It's a rethink, perhaps, on how we spend that. I'm happy to report that the exceptions that we reported on quarters 1 to 3, there were 10 in total. 7 of the 7 that were non-resident survey indicators, 3 met their target following interventions, having identified poor performance, and the full details are shown in Appendix C. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have on those as well.
Anyone have any questions? Councillor Wheeler.
Thanks, Chair. I think one of the points where, for example, the works upgrading to Campbell Community Centre and Luttrell Hall, it says the money's been moved to the another provision, the heat upgrade. Is that under this report? I couldn't see, or is that being scrutinised separately in terms of there's a separate budget, I'm assuming, for that? Because the money that was supposed to be spent on Gamson Community or community heating system, for example, it just says not spent. The reason is it's been provision moved to the property heating upgrades. So is that coming under that separate banner instead?
Yeah, so I think, well, Leanne's here actually, she can probably better answer. Well, Leanne could probably better answer than me, but I think rather than do it on those individual properties, to get the flat economies of scale, it's been put under the one banner for a range of properties. Is that correct? Yeah.
Sorry, just one more bit about the use example, for example, Luttrell Hall, where it says there's going to be quite an investment there in terms of the opportunities for the heating there. Is that also been looked at with the current exercise going on about potential disposal? Are we looking at to making sure that we're perhaps not spending all the money on doing it before a decision may be made?
Yes, we've paused any works that were required. We're carrying out some minor redecoration works because we're making a commitment to keep it in good condition, but any major works are on pause at the moment.
Right, anybody else? Any questions? Councillor Clark?
Well, it's a very minor one, Madam Chairman. It's on page 58, at the very top, the tree scheme. I just wanted to clarify, there's a balance of, or a carry forward of 7,000, and it says it's the 18-19 balance. Is that a balance from what in effect is a third of 50,000, not the whole 50,000?
Just the... Sorry, yeah, it's just the in-year allocation.
Right, so we're happy with that, and we've considered the contents of the report. and we're happy with it. All right. And I think that brings us to the end of our work for the evening. Has anybody anything they wish to say before I close the meeting? No? Right, so the meeting's closed at, what are we, 8:25.